The people who change your life rarely arrive when everything is going well. They appear when you least expect them. Just a few minutes before midnight, the emergency department of St. Gabriel Medical Center finally grew quiet after another relentless evening. Lucas Bennett adjusted the sleeves of his light blue nursing uniform, carefully organized the last patient files on the station desk, and thanked the night shift team before collecting his worn backpack. He had worked nearly 14 hours without complaining, covering an extra shift for a coworker whose young daughter had suddenly become ill. Exhaustion lingered in every slow movement, yet he still paused to reassure an elderly patient waiting for transportation home, offering a warm smile that seemed to brighten the silent hallway more than the fluorescent lights overhead. Caring for people had never been just a profession to Lucas. It was simply the way he believed life should be lived. The hospital corridors gradually emptied as doctors finished their rounds, and visitors quietly disappeared into the cool spring night. Lucas stepped into the elevator lobby and pressed the button leading to the parking garage below. Moments later, the doors opened, revealing a tall man already standing inside. Adrian Carter wore an impeccably tailored charcoal suit beneath a long black overcoat, his calm expression unchanged despite the late hour. Throughout the city, many people knew his family name because of the influence and business empire connected to it, yet very few truly understood the quiet discipline behind his reputation. Adrian acknowledged Lucas with a polite nod before the elevator doors closed. Neither man expected that the next few minutes would become one of the most important moments of their lives. The elevator descended smoothly for only a few seconds before a sudden mechanical vibration echoed through the cabin. The lights flickered once, then twice, before switching to the soft glow of emergency lighting. A gentle jolt followed, and the elevator came to a complete stop somewhere between two floors. For a brief moment, silence settled around them except for the distant hum of emergency power. Lucas instinctively reached for the communication panel, pressing the emergency call button with steady hands despite the surprise. A maintenance operator answered almost immediately, explaining that an unexpected electrical system malfunction had temporarily interrupted the elevator controls. Technicians were already on their way, and everyone inside should remain calm because assistance would arrive as quickly as possible. Lucas thanked the operator before releasing a slow breath. Although he regularly comforted anxious patients during medical emergencies, being confined inside a motionless elevator after such a long shift felt strangely different. Adrian noticed the subtle tension in Lucas's expression and spoke with an unexpectedly gentle voice. "They already know exactly where we are. There is no reason to worry." Lucas managed a polite smile. "I know. I tell people the same thing almost every day. It is easier to stay calm when you are helping someone else." Adrian quietly nodded, understanding more than Lucas realized. He removed a bottle of water from the leather briefcase resting beside him and offered it without saying another word. Lucas hesitated only briefly before accepting it with sincere gratitude. "Thank you." The simple exchange softened the silence between them. As the emergency lights cast a warm glow across the elevator walls, they began speaking about ordinary things instead of the unexpected situation surrounding them. Lucas described the satisfaction of watching patients recover after difficult weeks, while Adrian admitted that some of his longest business days ended with questions that money alone could never answer. Minutes passed almost unnoticed as the conversation became surprisingly comfortable. Lucas found himself laughing quietly at one of Adrian's dry observations about hospital vending machines always choosing the worst possible moment to stop working. Adrian smiled in return, realizing it had been far too long since a conversation had felt this effortless. Outside the elevator, technicians continued working patiently to restore the system, but inside the small cabin something far more meaningful had already begun. To complete. Strangers, brought together by an unexpected delay, were slowly discovering that genuine trust often starts not with dramatic promises or extraordinary events, but with simple kindness shared during an ordinary moment when neither person expected their life to quietly begin changing forever. The gentle glow of the emergency lights gave the silent elevator an almost peaceful atmosphere as the minutes slowly passed. Every so often a faint sound echoed through the shaft while technicians continued working above and below them, reminding both men that help was on the way. Lucas Bennett checked the emergency communication panel once more, receiving another reassuring update that repairs were progressing safely. Satisfied that everything remained under control, he leaned lightly against the wall and released a quiet breath. Adrian Carter noticed the fatigue that Lucas could no longer completely hide. "You have had a very long day," he said calmly. Lucas smiled with quiet embarrassment. 14 hours. It was supposed to be 12, but someone needed help. Adrian tilted his head slightly. "And you stayed." Lucas nodded without hesitation. "Sometimes people cannot choose when life becomes difficult. If I can make one person's day a little easier, another 2 hours feels like a fair trade." Adrian looked at him thoughtfully. Throughout his career, he had met countless people who spoke about generosity, but very few who treated kindness as naturally as breathing. "Do you always put everyone else first?" he asked. Lucas laughed softly before looking down at the bottle of water still resting in his hands. "Not always. I simply try to leave people feeling a little better than when I found them." The answer lingered in the quiet elevator. Adrian found himself unexpectedly reflecting on his own life. Endless meetings, business negotiations, and responsibilities had taught him how to solve complicated problems, yet they rarely left room for simple conversations like this one. "That is a rare way to see the world," he admitted. Lucas shrugged modestly. "My grandmother raised me. She always said that people remember how you made them feel much longer than they remember what you said." Adrian smiled faintly. "She sounds wise." "She is," Lucas replied warmly. "She reminds me every Sunday that kindness costs less than regret." Both men laughed quietly, the sound making the confined space feel surprisingly comfortable instead of restrictive. Minutes later, the emergency lights flickered gently as the ventilation system adjusted. Lucas instinctively glanced upward before reassuring himself that everything remained stable. Adrian noticed the movement and spoke with steady confidence. "The technicians know exactly what they are doing." Lucas nodded. "I trust them. Hospitals prepare us to expect the unexpected." Adrian folded his hands comfortably. "Business does the same thing. Every difficult situation eventually becomes another decision." Lucas considered those words with curiosity. "Is that how you stay calm?" Adrian looked toward the closed elevator doors. "No. I stay calm because panic has never solved a problem faster." Lucas smiled, recognizing the quiet wisdom behind the statement. Their conversation drifted naturally from work to favorite books, memorable travel destinations, and the small routines that brought comfort after demanding days. Lucas admitted he loved walking through botanical gardens whenever he had a free afternoon because flowers reminded him that growth often happens slowly and quietly. Adrian confessed that despite his demanding schedule, he collected first-edition novels whenever he traveled, believing every well-loved book carried a history of its own. The unexpected similarities surprised them both. Eventually, a clear voice came through the emergency speaker announcing that power had been restored and the elevator would begin moving again within moments. Lucas looked toward the doors with visible relief, yet he also realized he felt strangely disappointed that their conversation was coming to an end. A gentle vibration passed beneath their feet before the elevator smoothly resumed its descent. As the doors finally opened into the nearly empty parking level, both men stepped into the quiet garage where the cool night air drifted gently through the entrance. For a brief moment, neither seemed eager to leave. Adrian reached into his jacket pocket and removed a simple business card before offering it to Lucas. "If you ever need anything, even advice, call me." Lucas accepted the card politely, not because of the impressive name printed across it, but because the man standing before him had earned his trust through patience, sincerity, and quiet respect. As they walked toward their separate cars beneath the peaceful midnight sky, neither of them realized that the shortest elevator ride of their lives had quietly become the beginning of a journey neither one would ever forget. The business card remained tucked safely inside Lucas Bennett's wallet for several days, not because he expected to use it, but because the unusual encounter lingered in his thoughts whenever he finished another exhausting shift. Life at St. Gabriel Medical Center quickly returned to its familiar rhythm. Ambulances arrived at every hour. Families waited anxiously for encouraging news, and nurses moved through crowded hallways with steady determination. Lucas embraced every responsibility with the same quiet patience he had always shown. He stayed late when another department became overwhelmed, comforted frightened children before routine procedures, and carefully explained medications to elderly patients until every question had been answered. Many of his co-workers admired him because he never treated compassion as something reserved for extraordinary moments. For Lucas, kindness belonged in ordinary conversations, gentle smiles, and the extra few minutes spent listening when someone simply needed to be heard. Across the city, Adrian Carter found himself thinking about the young nurse far more often than he expected. Their conversation inside the elevator had been brief, yet it had carried a sincerity that stood apart from the carefully managed interactions filling most of his professional life. Curious rather than suspicious, Adrian quietly asked the director of his charitable foundation whether St. Gabriel Medical Center had any ongoing community health programs that might benefit from additional support. The request appeared routine, but what truly interested him was learning more about the people dedicating their lives to serving others. As reports gradually arrived, one name continued appearing again and again. Lucas Bennett had volunteered at neighborhood wellness fairs on weekends, organized free blood pressure screenings for senior citizens, mentored newly hired nurses, and frequently accepted extra shifts without asking for recognition. Hospital supervisors consistently described him as dependable, humble, and remarkably calm under pressure. Even more impressive, several letters from grateful patients praised not only his medical professionalism, but also the genuine encouragement he offered during difficult recoveries. Adrian quietly read every page before setting the folder aside with thoughtful silence. None of those achievements had been mentioned during their conversation. Lucas had spoken only about helping people, never about himself. A few afternoons later, Adrian attended a scheduled meeting with the hospital administration regarding one of his foundation's existing education grants. As the discussion concluded, he politely asked whether he could briefly tour the patient care units before leaving. The administrators happily agreed, proud to showcase the dedication of their medical staff. Walking through the bright hallways, Adrian observed nurses, physicians, therapists, and volunteers working together with remarkable coordination. Then he noticed Lucas at the end of a corridor, kneeling beside an elderly gentleman seated in a wheelchair. The patient's worried expression slowly softened as Lucas patiently explained the next steps of his treatment with reassuring warmth. When the conversation ended, Lucas adjusted the man's blanket, offered an encouraging smile, and wished him a peaceful afternoon before continuing toward another patient waiting nearby. There was no audience applauding him, no cameras recording the moment, and no expectation of praise. It was simply another act of quiet humanity repeated countless times throughout his day. Adrian remained where he stood for several seconds, realizing he had just witnessed the same authenticity that had filled the elevator only days before. One of the hospital administrators noticed his attention and smiled proudly. "Lucas has that effect on people," she said. "Whenever someone feels afraid, somehow he reminds them they are not facing it alone." Adrian nodded slowly. "That is not something you can teach in a classroom." As he left the hospital later that afternoon, he looked back at the building illuminated by the gentle sunlight. For years he had measured success through completed projects, expanding partnerships, and growing opportunities. Yet now another thought quietly settled into his mind. Sometimes the greatest investment was not in buildings or businesses, but in extraordinary people whose kindness created lasting change one life at a time. Without realizing it, Adrian had already begun making a decision that would soon transform not only Lucas's future, but the future of an entire community. Over the following week, Adrian Carter could not ignore the thought that had quietly taken root after his visit to St. Gabriel Medical Center. The aging medical equipment, the crowded treatment areas, and the unwavering dedication of the staff remained vivid in his memory. What impressed him most was not what the hospital lacked, but what its people continued to accomplish despite limited resources. During a meeting with the executive board of the Carter Foundation, Adrian placed several reports on the conference table and calmly outlined a new proposal. Instead of offering a single charitable donation, he wanted to establish a long-term partnership with the hospital that would modernize patient care, expand community outreach, provide continuing education for nurses, and create mobile health clinics capable of serving neighborhoods with limited access to medical services. The room grew quiet as board members reviewed the detailed plans. One advisor looked up and asked, "This will require a significant commitment. What convinced you that this project should become a priority?" Adrian paused for a moment before answering honestly. Because I have seen what extraordinary people can accomplish when they have almost everything except the resources they deserve. Within days, discussions between the foundation and hospital administration officially began. Hospital leaders welcomed the opportunity, although they remained cautiously optimistic until every agreement had been carefully reviewed. Adrian insisted that every decision focus on practical improvements that would directly benefit patients and medical staff rather than publicity. He requested updated diagnostic equipment, expanded training opportunities, improved staff wellness programs, and additional funding for preventive health education throughout the city. As planning meetings continued, Lucas Bennett remained completely unaware of Adrian's involvement. His days continued exactly as before. He checked on recovering patients before sunrise, patiently explained treatment plans to anxious families, and encouraged newly hired nurses who sometimes doubted themselves after difficult shifts. One afternoon, while helping organize supplies for an upcoming community vaccination event, Lucas was unexpectedly asked to attend a meeting with hospital administrators. Assuming it involved scheduling changes, he entered the conference room carrying a notebook and a pen. Instead, he found Adrian seated beside the hospital director and several foundation representatives. For a brief second, surprise crossed Lucas's face before he smiled politely. Adrian returned the smile with the same calm warmth Lucas remembered from the elevator. The hospital director welcomed him and explained that the Carter Foundation had chosen St. Gabriel as its newest long-term community health partner. She continued by describing plans to improve patient care, expand neighborhood wellness programs, and support the professional development of nurses across the organization. Then she turned toward Lucas with an encouraging expression. Several department leaders recommended one name when we discussed who truly represents the heart of this hospital, she said. Your dedication inspired this conversation more than you realize. Lucas looked visibly overwhelmed. He immediately shook his head with quiet humility. There are many wonderful nurses here. I have simply been doing my job. Adrian spoke gently before anyone else could respond. That is exactly why you stood out. The people who make the greatest difference are often the ones who never ask to be noticed. Silence filled the room for a moment as Lucas searched for the right words. Gratitude, disbelief, and quiet emotion blended across his expression. He thanked everyone sincerely, but emphasized that any success would belong to the entire hospital team rather than one individual. Adrian watched him with growing admiration, realizing that recognition had not changed Lucas at all. His humility remained as genuine as the night they first met. As the meeting concluded, the foundation and hospital officially agreed to begin building a healthier future together. Walking out of the conference room beneath the bright afternoon sunlight, Adrian and Lucas exchanged a brief glance that required no explanation. The unexpected delay inside a quiet elevator had led them to this moment, where one thoughtful decision had begun opening doors that neither of them could have imagined only a few short weeks earlier. Construction crews arrived before sunrise only a few weeks later, and the quiet hospital campus gradually transformed into a place filled with renewed energy and optimism. New medical equipment was delivered, outdated examination rooms were carefully renovated without interrupting patient care, and training sessions were scheduled for nurses, therapists, and support staff eager to learn the latest techniques. Beyond the hospital walls, the Carter Foundation officially launched a series of community health initiatives designed to bring preventive care directly into neighborhoods where medical services had often been difficult to access. Mobile health clinics, wellness education events, and free screenings quickly became part of a growing mission that reached thousands of local residents. When hospital administrators began selecting leaders for the outreach programs, Lucas Bennett was invited to serve as one of the primary coordinators because of his experience, patience, and natural ability to connect with people from every background. Although surprised by the opportunity, Lucas accepted with quiet gratitude, believing the new role would simply allow him to help even more families. His first assignment brought him to a neighborhood community center on a bright Saturday morning where volunteers prepared health information booths, children played nearby, and senior citizens gathered for complimentary blood pressure checks and wellness consultations. As Lucas welcomed each visitor with his familiar warmth, Adrian Carter quietly observed from across the event, choosing to remain among the volunteers instead of standing apart as a sponsor. He greeted local business owners, helped carry supply boxes, thanked medical students for donating their weekend, and listened carefully as residents shared ideas for improving future programs. Several people assumed Adrian was simply another volunteer until hospital leaders introduced him during the opening remarks. Lucas smiled to himself, realizing that the calm man from the elevator preferred meaningful work over public attention. Throughout the day, their paths crossed naturally. Lucas introduced Adrian to families who had benefited from recent hospital improvements, while Adrian listened with genuine interest to stories from patients who described how expanded services had reduced long waiting times and made preventive care easier to receive. Watching Adrian patiently answer questions from children and older adults alike, Lucas recognized that the reserved businessman carried the same quiet compassion he had sensed during their first conversation. Late that afternoon, after the final visitors had left and volunteers began packing tables into storage trucks, Lucas and Adrian remained behind to help collect supplies. The warm spring breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass through the nearly empty park as they folded chairs and stacked reusable banners together. Lucas looked around at the smiling volunteers finishing their work and said softly, "It is amazing how many people came today. Some of them told me they had not seen a nurse in more than a year." Adrian nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes the biggest obstacle is not willingness. It is simply opportunity." Lucas agreed. "And today we gave people that opportunity." Adrian smiled gently. "You gave them hope long before I arrived. I only helped build the bridge." Lucas lowered his eyes with his usual humility before laughing quietly. "You always seem to know the right thing to say." Adrian chuckled. "Only after meeting someone who reminds me what really matters." The conversation settled into comfortable silence as the evening sun painted the sky with soft shades of gold and orange. Neither man felt the need to fill every moment with words because an easy trust had already begun to grow between them. As they loaded the final supply box into a foundation vehicle, both realized that they were no longer connected by a single unexpected night inside an elevator. They were now walking the same path with a shared purpose, discovering through each new project that genuine change was created not by one remarkable decision alone, but by countless ordinary acts of kindness carried forward together day after day. As spring gradually gave way to the warmth of early summer, the partnership between St. Gabriel Medical Center and the Carter Foundation became an inspiring example of what could happen when compassion and commitment moved in the same direction. Community health events expanded across neighboring counties. Mobile clinics visited schools, churches, and senior centers every week, and thousands of families received preventive care they had postponed for years. Lucas Bennett quickly became one of the most trusted faces of the outreach programs, not because he sought recognition, but because people naturally felt comfortable around him. Children smiled when they saw him. Older adults remembered his name after only one conversation, and nervous patients often relaxed the moment he greeted them with his calm voice and reassuring smile. Adrian Carter quietly watched those moments whenever his schedule allowed him to attend the events. Each visit confirmed what he had realized months earlier. Lucas possessed a rare gift that no business strategy could ever create. He made every individual feel important. Their professional partnership slowly developed into a comfortable friendship built on mutual respect rather than dramatic declarations. Some mornings Adrian arrived at the hospital cafe before meetings and discovered Lucas already enjoying a simple breakfast after finishing an overnight shift. They would sit together beside the large windows overlooking the hospital garden, sharing fresh coffee, fruit, and quiet conversations while the city slowly came to life outside. Lucas often spoke about the patients who had inspired him, while Adrian described the challenges of balancing responsibility with the desire to create meaningful change. Neither tried to impress the other. Instead, they listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and appreciated the honesty that had become so effortless between them. On quieter afternoons, when community events ended earlier than expected, they occasionally walked through the peaceful botanical garden that bordered the medical campus. Bright flowers lined the winding paths, gentle fountains reflected the afternoon sunlight, and families relaxed beneath tall shade trees while children laughed nearby. Lucas admitted those walks had become one of his favorite parts of the week because they reminded him to slow down after busy days filled with constant responsibility. Adrian confessed that before meeting Lucas, he rarely allowed himself time to simply enjoy moments without checking schedules or answering phone calls. "You have changed the way I measure a successful day," Adrian said one afternoon as they paused beside a bed of blooming white roses. Lucas looked at him with quiet curiosity. "How?" Adrian smiled thoughtfully. "I used to count completed meetings and finished projects. Now I ask myself whether someone's life became a little easier because I was there." Lucas lowered his eyes with a modest smile. "My grandmother would say that is a much better question." Adrian laughed softly. "I think I would enjoy meeting her someday." Lucas nodded warmly. "She would probably insist that you stay for dinner whether you plan to or not." The image made them both laugh, and the sound echoed gently through the peaceful garden. As weeks continued to pass, colleagues from both the hospital and the foundation began noticing how naturally Adrian and Lucas worked together. They solved unexpected problems without raising their voices, encouraged volunteers during long community events, and celebrated every small success with genuine gratitude rather than personal pride. Their growing trust inspired the people around them to cooperate more openly, creating an atmosphere where kindness spread as naturally as the programs themselves. Neither Adrian nor Lucas tried to define the quiet bond developing between them. There was no need to rush something that already felt steady and sincere. They simply continued walking side by side, discovering through ordinary mornings, shared conversations, and meaningful work that the strongest connections are often built slowly, one thoughtful moment at a time, until they become an unshakable part of everyday life. By the beginning of autumn, the Community Health Partnership had grown far beyond anyone's original expectations. What had started as a single commitment between the Carter Foundation and St. Gabriel Medical Center had expanded into a network of wellness programs serving neighborhoods throughout the region. Mobile clinics visited rural towns every week, preventive screenings became easier to access, and educational workshops encouraged families to build healthier lives before medical problems became emergencies. Hospital administrators often remarked that the greatest success was not measured by statistics alone, but by the growing confidence people felt knowing someone genuinely cared about their well-being. Lucas Bennett continued leading many of the outreach initiatives with the same quiet humility that had always defined him. Volunteers admired the way he remembered people's names, celebrated small victories, and treated every visitor with equal kindness regardless of their background. New nurses frequently asked to join his team because they believed working beside him taught lessons that no textbook could provide. Rather than giving formal speeches, Lucas preferred leading by example. He patiently demonstrated how listening carefully could calm anxious families, how a reassuring smile could encourage frightened children, and how respect often became the first step toward healing. Adrian Carter watched these moments with sincere admiration. During foundation meetings, executives praised the rapid growth of the programs, yet Adrian consistently redirected the attention toward the dedicated healthcare professionals and volunteers whose daily efforts made every achievement possible. Whenever reporters requested interviews highlighting the foundation's accomplishments, Adrian politely insisted that Lucas and the medical staff deserved equal recognition because lasting change was always created through teamwork rather than individual success. Although Lucas felt uncomfortable standing in front of cameras, he agreed to participate when he realized the interviews encouraged more volunteers, nurses, and local organizations to join the mission. His genuine sincerity quickly resonated with viewers across the community. Families shared stories about receiving medical guidance that had improved their lives. Students applied for healthcare internships after hearing him speak, and retired professionals returned to volunteer because they wanted to contribute to something meaningful. One afternoon, after a successful community wellness fair at a neighborhood recreation center, Lucas and Adrian remained behind as volunteers packed away tables and banners beneath colorful autumn trees. The event had welcomed hundreds of visitors, and laughter still echoed from families walking toward the parking lot carrying health information and fresh produce donated by local farmers. Lucas looked across the nearly empty field with quiet satisfaction. "Do you remember how impossible all of this seemed at the beginning?" he asked. Adrian smiled as he folded the final banner with careful hands. I remember thinking we might improve one hospital. Lucas laughed softly. Now we are helping entire communities. Adrian nodded. And the most remarkable part is that every new program inspires another idea. Kindness has a way of growing when people choose to share it. They walked slowly toward the foundation vehicle as the afternoon sunlight filtered through golden leaves. Along the path, several children who had attended the health fair recognized Lucas and enthusiastically waved goodbye. Lucas greeted each of them by name, earning surprised smiles from their parents. Adrian quietly observed the exchange before saying, "You never forget anyone." Lucas shrugged with his familiar modesty. "Everyone wants to feel remembered." Adrian looked at him thoughtfully. "You have given thousands of people that feeling." Lucas smiled warmly but gently changed the subject, asking about the Foundation's next outreach project instead of accepting the compliment. Adrian realized once again that Lucas measured success not by recognition, but by the number of lives made a little brighter. As they drove back toward the city beneath the warm colors of the setting sun, both understood that their shared journey was no longer defined by one unexpected meeting or one generous decision. It had become a lasting purpose that continued bringing hope, dignity, and opportunity to countless people, while quietly strengthening the unspoken bond that had grown between them every step of the way. Nearly 1 year had passed since the unexpected evening that quietly connected two strangers inside a motionless elevator, and St. Gabriel Medical Center had become a place filled with renewed confidence and possibility. The renovated patient care units welcomed families with brighter spaces, modern equipment supported faster diagnoses, and the community outreach programs continued expanding into neighborhoods that once had limited access to quality health care. For Lucas Bennett, every improvement represented something far greater than new technology or larger facilities. Each change meant another family receiving hope a little sooner and another patient feeling less alone during difficult moments. Early one crisp autumn morning, Lucas arrived at the hospital before sunrise to prepare for another community health event scheduled later that day. As he crossed the familiar lobby carrying folders and volunteer schedules, he noticed the elevator doors quietly waiting just ahead. He paused for a brief moment, smiling to himself as memories returned with remarkable clarity. The soft emergency lights, the calm conversation, the unexpected bottle of water, and the reassuring voice that had transformed an inconvenient delay into the beginning of something extraordinary all seemed as vivid as if they had happened only yesterday. Taking a slow breath, Lucas stepped inside the elevator and pressed the button for the main conference level. This time the cabin moved smoothly upward without interruption. Instead of uncertainty, he felt only gratitude. When the doors gently opened, warm morning sunlight streamed through the nearby windows, filling the hallway with golden light. Standing just outside was Adrian Carter, holding 2 cups of fresh coffee with the relaxed smile Lucas had come to know so well over the past year. "Perfect timing," Adrian said warmly as he handed 1 cup to Lucas. "I thought you might need this before another busy day." Lucas accepted it with genuine appreciation and laughed softly. "You still seem to know exactly when coffee becomes necessary." Adrian smiled. "I have learned from the best nurse I know." They walked together toward the hospital garden where volunteers would soon gather before leaving for the community event. Along the pathway, physicians greeted Lucas by name. Maintenance staff waved cheerfully to Adrian, and volunteers enthusiastically discussed plans for the day's health fair. Watching everyone work together so naturally filled both men with quiet satisfaction. They reached a familiar bench overlooking colorful flower beds that had become one of their favorite places for early morning conversations. Lucas looked across the peaceful garden before speaking thoughtfully. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if that elevator had never stopped." Adrian considered the question for a moment before answering. "Then we probably would have walked past each other without ever knowing what we had missed." Lucas smiled gently as he looked down at his coffee. It is strange how one unexpected moment can redirect an entire life. Adrian nodded. The elevator did not change our lives by itself. It simply gave us the chance to make a different choice afterward. Lucas quietly reflected on those words while watching sunlight illuminate the flowers surrounding them. He realized Adrian was right. Every meaningful chapter that followed had been built one thoughtful decision at a time, through kindness, trust, patience, and a shared commitment to serving others. As volunteers began gathering across the garden, Lucas and Adrian stood together and joined the team preparing for another day of helping their community. Looking back once more toward the elevator doors visible through the hospital windows, Lucas no longer saw the place where an unexpected delay had interrupted his routine. Instead, he saw the place where hope had quietly opened a door that neither of them had ever planned to walk through, yet both had been grateful to discover together. Several months later, the partnership that had begun with one unexpected encounter had become woven into the daily life of the entire community. Families who once struggled to find preventive care now attended regular wellness programs with confidence. Children received health education at school through the outreach teams, and senior citizens looked forward to the monthly visits from the mobile clinics that had become familiar symbols of hope. Inside St. Gabriel Medical Center, new nurses often heard experienced staff describe how kindness could transform a patient's experience just as surely as modern equipment could improve treatment. Lucas Bennett never claimed credit for any of it. He continued arriving early, greeting coworkers with the same warm smile, comforting anxious families, and quietly encouraging every volunteer who joined the growing mission. Adrian Carter remained equally committed, ensuring that every new project strengthened the foundation's promise to serve people with dignity rather than publicity. One cool evening after another successful community celebration, Adrian invited Lucas to walk through the peaceful rooftop garden overlooking the city skyline. The last colors of sunset stretched across the horizon while lights gradually illuminated the streets below. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers through the garden, creating the same calm atmosphere they had come to treasure during countless conversations over the past year. They stopped beside a quiet fountain where the sound of flowing water blended with the distant rhythm of the city. For a while, neither of them spoke. They simply stood together, appreciating how far their journey had brought them. Finally, Adrian looked toward Lucas with a gentle smile and asked, "Do you remember the first thing I ever told you after the elevator stopped?" Lucas laughed softly. "You said there was no reason to worry because help was already on the way." Adrian nodded. "I believed those words then, but I understand them differently now." Lucas looked at him with quiet curiosity. Adrian continued, "Sometimes help arrives as a technician fixing an elevator. Sometimes it arrives as a person who changes the way you see the world." Lucas lowered his eyes for a moment before smiling with sincere gratitude. "I think we both found that person." The quiet honesty of the moment needed no grand declaration because every shared experience had already spoken for itself. They had learned that trust was built through consistency, compassion grew through ordinary choices, and lasting relationships were strengthened by showing up for one another day after day. Lucas thought about the frightened patients who had later found hope, the volunteers who had discovered a new purpose, and the families whose lives had quietly improved because someone had chosen to care. Adrian reflected on the countless meetings, partnerships, and community projects that had become meaningful only because they were guided by genuine humanity instead of ambition alone. Looking across the city, Lucas smiled and said, "It is amazing that one unexpected delay could lead us here." Adrian answered with the same calm confidence that had comforted Lucas from the very beginning. "The elevator only stopped for a little while. Our lives kept moving in the right direction because we decided to walk it together." They shared a quiet smile as the evening sky slowly filled with stars above the peaceful hospital grounds. Below them, lights continued shining from patient rooms where dedicated nurses cared for those in need. Volunteers prepared for another day of service, and countless lives moved forward with renewed hope. In that gentle moment, both understood that the greatest changes rarely begin with extraordinary events. They begin with simple kindness, quiet courage, and one thoughtful choice that inspires another until an ordinary day becomes the first page of a life neither person could have imagined alone.